Okay, this is a fun one. We're going to talk about walking and how we accentuate or heighten or feed our gait system some new access to some new motions. What's really interesting about pelvic motions is that there's a cultural link. Latinos, Brazilians tend to have a lot more pelvic motions than Aussies or Anglo-Saxons or the English, who tend to have more of a rigid way of moving through space. And a lot of this, they've done studies in this, is related to the dance, the national dances, the cultural pastimes of the country. So be mindful and watch people move. It's one of my habits. I can't help it. But you'll see people who move freely. You'll see people who move with rigidity. And obviously that changes depending on our emotional state, whether we're in a hurry, whether we're unhurried, whether we're carrying things. But we'll go through some of the common ways to play with your gait patterns so that every time you go out for a walk, which is one of the best motions you can do for your body and for your spine, is to simply walk and combine it with nature and fresh air and music and fun and a good conversation, and you're feeding your biochemistry, or you're take your animal, take your dog, you're feeding your body some really great double hits. You're stacking the benefits to the system in a short period of time. And that's what healing is all about. So let's talk about some gait patterns. Okay, so if we're thinking about, first of all, before we go for a walk, obviously things we want to think about: shoes. If you've got your big hiking boots on, you're limiting what motion can go on in your feet. Now, there may be reasons that you choose to do that, and that's okay. But if your feet feel like they can have less support, then take that opportunity, because every time you place that foot on the ground, those bones in the foot are going to move a bit more, which will help your knee move a bit more, which will help your hip move a bit more, which will help your spine move a bit more. So footwear is the first thing. Second thing is, before you go for a walk, check in with your pelvis. Get a sense of, is it centered? If I'm here and I go off walking, I'm going to have a lot of weight going through my left hip and my left side of my spine. And that's going to pull me up in pain, no doubt, in a fairly short period of time. And then I'm going to say, I don't like walking, it's not good for my back. Well, yeah, it's not good for your back if you're not centered. So we want to maximize the time we can walk, and we'll achieve that if we get this alignment even a little bit better than what it currently is. So minimal footwear if you can, or no footwear even, but that's perhaps a little bit extreme for some. Center your pelvis. Think about your hips and loosening them up before you go. And I would simply turn my feet out and do 2 or 3 circles. And then I would turn my feet in and do 2 or 3 circles. Think about that as just lubricating the hip joints and the knee joints and the foot joints, so that as you walk, already there's a little bit more motion in the system. And now we're ready to walk. And as we're walking, we want to think about, what is our habit? Are we quite structured and straight? What's our foot spacing or our step length? Do we tend to take big steps? Or do we tend to take little short steps? Are we heavy on our feet? Or do we tend to bounce along with nice springy knees? Playing with gait's really fun. And by the way, none of them are bad, none of them are good. I just want to throw some variety at you so you can play with some things. If we go back to our pelvic motions, every time we take a step, ideally, as the weight comes across, we get a shift and we get a hike. And then as we bring this foot through, we get a shift and a hike. And that motion is something that we want to kind of, if we're just walking like this, we're not really getting. So perhaps you could just emphasize that as you walk. Just have a feel for letting your pelvis move fully across onto the foot. It may feel like a little bit of a swagger, but it's worth playing with. You could walk backwards and get a sense of what that feels like. You could walk with your legs turned out a little, see what that feels like. That really opens up the hips and makes your pelvis feel new things. You could walk with your feet turned in. Just see how you move differently when you start playing with your foot positions. You could put one out and one in. And all of these are great. They're building your motor cortex. They're helping your brain feel new things, and that's how it learns. One of the biggest ones I see is the eyes and where they're tracking. If we look down, our head goes down. The head follows the eyes. So if I'm looking down and I'm walking, I am always in a slight forward lean, and my back will really not enjoy that, nor will the back of my neck. So where possible, and I know this becomes a bit of a challenge as you're getting older and you want to make sure the coast is clear, and that's cool. Sometimes it's nice to pause, check that you have a clear space, and then elevate your eyes, preferably above the horizon, which brings the head on axis with the rib cage, and then walk from that slightly taller position. That really lifting up the eyes, looking up to the treetops, looking at the birds as you walk will help lengthen your spine as you walk. Another really cool thing to play with is your arm swing. Now, this is common. I have no arm swing, which means I have zero rotation going on through my spine, which means my pelvis is not accessing any of its rotations. So how can we make the rotational aspect of walking a bit greater? We can simply swing our arms. And if we swing our arms across our body as we walk, and we feel our sternum actually moving to the left, moving to the right, then as we walk, we're getting a really lovely rotational aspect through the body, and it will help the hips activate, move differently. So arm swing is a really nice way to get your spinal mobility, your head high as you walk. Be mindful about walking a dog and having it on a lead and having it fixed. Because if I walk like this, and that's my habit, and I swing my left arm, then what I'm doing is encouraging spinal rotation to the left. My rotation to the right is being blocked by my arm being out in front. So that habit in itself is going to be really restricting and creating some imbalances in your back. So best case scenario, you keep swapping, or you get one of those leads where the dog comes off the middle of you, or you find somewhere to walk with it off lead. Just keep mixing it up, worst case scenario. But hopefully that's given you some ideas about gait and how to have fun and how to play with it. The only other one I can think of is this lovely idea of how do we get our cogs happening while we walk. And basically, when we step, we want to feel that as our weight's on our back leg, we're a little bit in the flexion phase. As we move our weight forward, we lift into the extension phase. And then as we take a step, we drop back, and then we lift tall. So sometimes just emphasizing the arm swing in a vertical plane as we walk, and feeling this moment in time, and then this moment in time. Beautiful expansive lines through the body that when we access them, open us up entirely in new places. So enjoy your walking, but the core messages are minimal shoes if possible, barefoot surfaces even better for short periods of time, uneven surfaces, different textures, hot and cold. I think I've slammed that message, and that's to wake up our brain and to give us more motion, to give us more connectivity and balance with our feet. Center your pelvis before you go. Loosen up your hips before you go. And then play. Play with arm swing, play with foot position, play with bounce, play with stride length. Play. Play with where your eyes go. Too many options. Have fun with it, but see walking as a really great way to stimulate your system in a whole new way.